The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers as Bruce Willis stepped through the double doors, not as an actor today, but as a man defending himself. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare over the sterile courtroom, but Bruce's eyes were calm, steady. He wore a charcoal grey suit slightly wrinkled like he'd put it on in a hurry, but his posture, impeccable, not a hint of hesitation. Judge Leonard Trask barely looked up from the papers in front of him. "Mr. Willis," he said dryly, "representing yourself today?" Bruce gave a slow nod. "That's right, Your Honor." The courtroom chuckled. This was that Bruce Willis, an action star, not a lawyer. A man whose face was better known for breaking box office records than breaking down legal codes. A man who should have been sitting in a witness chair with a legal team behind him, not standing alone in front of a federal judge. But this wasn't a movie. Judge Trask's lips twitched with condescension. "You do realize this is a federal case, Mr. Willis?" "I do. You're being accused of breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and interference with business relations." "That's not light reading." Bruce's voice didn't waver. "Then it's good I spent the last 6 months reading." The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. "This isn't a game, Mr. Willis. We don't act out here." "I'm not acting." "Then you're in deeper trouble than I thought." Bruce didn't flinch. He adjusted his tie and opened the battered leather briefcase he'd carried in. No assistant. No security detail, just him and a pile of carefully tabbed legal documents. On the opposite side of the courtroom, the plaintiff's attorney, a flashy, overconfident man named Howard Dresner, rolled his eyes. He whispered something to his associate and snorted under his breath. Trask glanced between them. "Let's proceed." As Dresner stood to speak, Bruce's gaze scanned the courtroom. The gallery was half full, media mostly, along with a few die-hard fans who had camped outside since morning. But none of them mattered. What mattered was what Bruce had uncovered. Dresner's opening was slick, rehearsed. "Your Honor, what we have here is a celebrity who thinks the law doesn't apply to him. He violated confidentiality clauses, stole intellectual material, and tried to shop a stolen script to a rival studio." Trask nodded, expression unreadable. Bruce waited. He didn't interrupt. When his turn came, he rose slowly, calmly. "Your Honor, with all due respect to Mr. Dresner, this case is built on a false narrative. I have evidence that the contract was already nullified by the plaintiff 6 months ago. I'll also demonstrate that the so-called intellectual property originated from my own private notes, dated prior to any engagement with them. And finally, I will prove that Mr. Dresner's firm engaged in deliberate suppression of this evidence during discovery." There was a silence. No stammer, no hesitation. Just facts. Judge Trask's brow furrowed. "You filed a motion to compel?" "Motion 32C, filed under seal. I included 3 appendices with timestamps and metadata logs." Trask looked down, flipping through his docket. His eyes widened slightly. "You wrote this motion?" "I did." Trask's jaw tensed. He looked at Dresner. "Why wasn't this addressed in your rebuttal?" Dresner was suddenly sweating. "Your Honor, we were under the impression that Mr. Willis wouldn't know what he was doing." No one laughed now. Bruce returned to his seat without another word. A silent storm brewed behind Trask's eyes. And in that moment, the courtroom realized something. This wasn't going to be the simple intimidation game they expected. Bruce Willis wasn't just defending himself. He was about to expose something far bigger. To everyone watching, if this story surprised you even a little, imagine what's coming next. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. This courtroom drama is just getting started. The night air outside the courthouse was thick with humidity and camera flashes. Reporters shouted questions, but Bruce didn't answer any of them. He ducked into a waiting SUV and pulled the door shut with a quiet finality. Inside it was dark and cool, no entourage, just silence. He leaned back, eyes closed for a moment, the weight of the day settling into his chest, but not regret. No, not even fatigue, just calculation. Bruce had played many roles in his life, but none had demanded this kind of precision. This wasn't Hollywood. This was war, and the battlefield was a courtroom. Back in his downtown loft, he peeled off his jacket and flipped open his laptop. The screen lit up with scanned contracts, email chains, depositions. He moved through the files like a man on a mission, not just trying to win, but to uncover. Because what the public didn't know was that this lawsuit wasn't really about a script. It was about silencing him. 6 months earlier, Bruce had been approached by a small group of veteran writers, quiet, talented people whose names never made the headlines, but whose work built billion-dollar franchises. They told him stories about stolen ideas, forced sign-overs, blacklisted scripts. At first he thought it was paranoia, until he found himself reading a script that looked eerily similar to something he had written in a private notebook 10 years ago. He confronted the studio. They dismissed him. Then the threats started. And then a lawsuit, painted as a publicity stunt, accusing him of the very theft he had been warning them about. Bruce knew if he hired a standard legal team, it'd be game over. No one wanted to take on a studio that powerful, not without repercussions. So he dug in. He started studying case law, reaching out to legal scholars, even auditing law classes under a fake name at a university in Los Angeles. Months passed. The old Bruce, smirking, unshakable, began to fade. In his place, someone quieter, sharper, someone no one expected. The next morning in court, Bruce arrived early. Trask was already on the bench, poring over the motion he'd filed. "Mr. Willis," the judge said, not looking up, "your argument regarding IP origination is detailed." Bruce stood. It had to be. Trask's eyes flicked toward him. "You included metadata, version histories, and notarized copies of concept drafts." "Most attorneys don't go this far. I couldn't afford not to." Trask didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You might have been a good lawyer." Bruce's mouth curved slightly. "Still might be." Dresner stood next, trying to recover momentum. "Your Honor, even if Mr. Willis has documentation, this doesn't prove he didn't share it verbally or implicitly during project development." Bruce didn't interrupt, but when his turn came, he dropped the next hammer. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an audio recording dated August 14th of last year. In it, a member of the plaintiff's development team discusses lifting story elements from my work without my consent." Trask blinked. "Do you have consent to use that recording?" "California's all-party consent laws apply, but the conversation took place in New York, where single-party consent is legal, and I was the party." The courtroom stilled. Dresner turned pale. Judge Trask asked for a recess. As Bruce walked past Dresner on his way out of the courtroom, he leaned in just enough to be heard. "I'm not the man you push." The recording played in the judge's chambers behind closed doors. Bruce wasn't there to watch it land, but he didn't need to be. He knew the exact words spoken on that call down to the stammer before the admission. "Honestly, we figured we'd just tweak his stuff enough." "He's not going to read the fine print. We'll bury it in development." Bruce had listened to that clip over 100 times, alone in the dark, wondering if exposing it would do more harm than good. But now, it was out, and the cracks in the plaintiff's story were starting to show. Outside the courtroom, Dresner paced the hallway on the phone, voice raised but shaky. "I don't care what it takes, shut this down. I don't want that clip reaching discovery phase, do you understand me?" Bruce sat quietly nearby, pretending to read. Every word was a gift. He had learned early on. Never interrupt when your enemies are unraveling themselves. Inside the court, Judge Trask was no longer amused. When the session resumed, his tone had shifted. "Mr. Dresner," he said sternly, "I'm beginning to wonder if this court was misled." Dresner tried to rally. "Your Honor, even if there was poor judgment on the part of a junior executive, that doesn't invalidate the contractual framework of our claims." Bruce rose. "Your Honor, may I approach?" Trask nodded. Bruce handed him a printed email chain, marked, time-stamped, signed by the plaintiff's VP of Content. The language was plain. "We know this is from his personal notes, but the contract leaves him open. Let's push it." Trask read slowly, and for the first time, he looked up at Bruce with something beyond irritation. Respect. Where did you obtain this? Legal subpoena to the email server logs. They didn't expect me to dig that deep. Trask looked at Dresner. Is this authentic? Dresner was silent. Bruce returned to his seat without waiting for drama. He didn't need grand gestures. The facts were louder than any performance. Across the aisle, the plaintiff, a studio executive named Sylvia Keene, glared at Bruce like he'd just burned her house down. She leaned in and whispered something furious to her legal team. Bruce noticed. He wrote her name on his legal pad, then underlined it once. The court adjourned early that day. Back in his loft, Bruce stared out over the Los Angeles skyline as the sun dipped low behind the haze. Neon signs flickered to life. The city never truly slept, but there were hours when its predators were louder than usual. He poured a coffee black and sat back at his desk. A new file folder blinked on his screen, an anonymous drop, encrypted. He opened it. Inside, a PDF labeled Keen Internal Strategy Memo. It laid out a preemptive campaign to discredit Bruce publicly if he got too close to the truth. Social media manipulation, whisper campaigns, tabloid leaks. So this wasn't just about money. It was about silencing. Bruce exhaled through his nose. If they thought they were playing chess, they'd picked the wrong man to underestimate. The next morning, Bruce filed a motion for evidentiary sanctions, citing discovery misconduct and suppression. Attached were the memo, the source metadata, and a sworn affidavit from the anonymous whistleblower, someone inside the studio who'd had enough. By noon, the judge called an emergency hearing. "Mr. Willis," he said as Bruce stepped forward, "you're forcing this court to consider sanctions that go well beyond what we expected. If what you've presented holds up, we're talking about perjury and malicious prosecution." Bruce nodded once. "I understand." But what he didn't say, not yet, was that this went even deeper. And he was only just beginning to dig. The courtroom was packed. By the time Bruce entered, word had already spread about the leaked memo, the sanctions hearing, and the whispers that someone from inside the studio had flipped. Reporters filled every seat. Cameramen lined the back wall. Even rival lawyers from other firms had shown up, pretending to be curious spectators. Judge Trask wasn't smiling anymore. He looked tired and angry. "Let's be clear," he said, tapping the bench with his gavel. "If I find that there was a coordinated effort to obstruct discovery, falsify claims, or discredit a defendant through non-legal means, there will be consequences. Real ones." Dresner had been replaced. In his place stood a corporate crisis litigator named Marla Vey. Flinty, sharp, unnerving. She had the kind of presence that made silence stretch longer than it should. She glanced at Bruce, not with arrogance, but calculation. "Your Honor," she said coolly, "we're prepared to respond to the defendant's allegations. But I'd like to request a delay in evidentiary sanctions until we've had time to conduct a thorough internal audit." Bruce stood. "Respectfully, Your Honor, that delay would only give them time to bury more evidence. I have a witness ready to testify today." Trask's eyes flicked to Bruce. "A live witness?" Bruce nodded. "Yes. And they're here." A ripple moved through the courtroom as a woman stood from the back row, mid-30s, plain gray blazer, nervous but determined. She walked to the front with shaky steps and took the stand. Her name was Angela Klein, former assistant to Sylvia Keene. Under oath, she confirmed the memo's authenticity, confirmed that Bruce's ideas had been stolen intentionally, confirmed that the lawsuit was retaliatory, meant to shut him up and burn his credibility before he could speak. Bruce didn't look at the gallery. He didn't need to. He was watching Trask, and Trask was listening. When cross-examination began, Vey tried to shake Angela's testimony. She leaned in, harsh, rapid-fire. "You say you were present during meetings involving IP theft. Where are the recordings? Where are the signatures?" Angela didn't flinch. "You already deleted them, but not before I backed them up." Vey paused, just long enough. Trask raised an eyebrow. Angela opened a flash drive. Exhibit B, chain of emails between Sylvia Keene and multiple studio attorneys. Bruce took it from her and handed it to the bailiff. Within minutes, the courtroom was silent again, watching, waiting. Trask read in real time. Halfway through the file, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low breath. Good God. Bruce didn't smile, not even a twitch. This wasn't a victory yet. It was a turning point. Trask spoke. Based on the witness testimony and supporting evidence, I am suspending all motions from the plaintiff's side, effective immediately. A hearing for potential sanctions and criminal referrals will be scheduled. Angela stepped down from the stand, visibly trembling. Bruce helped her off. As the crowd murmured, Sylvia Keene stood from the plaintiff's table. "Your Honor," she said, voice rising, "this is a setup. He's manipulating this court." Trask slammed the gavel once. "Enough!" Bruce looked at her, not with revenge, but something worse. Pity, because she didn't see it yet. This didn't end in a courtroom. It was going to ripple through the industry, through boardrooms and contracts and the false power structures built on silence. And Bruce wasn't going to stop it. He was going to finish it. 3 weeks later, the court reconvened. The city buzzed with the fallout, studio executives resigning, press releases spinning, podcasts dissecting every move Bruce had made. What started as a lawsuit had become a full-blown reckoning. Judge Trask walked into the courtroom with a thick folder in hand. His expression was stone. The court has reviewed all submitted evidence, witness testimony, internal documents, and third-party communications. The findings are deeply troubling. He paused, scanning the room. In a blatant attempt to silence and discredit the defendant, the plaintiffs knowingly submitted false claims, suppressed critical evidence, and orchestrated a media campaign designed to destroy his professional reputation. Sylvia Keene sat frozen at the table, her new attorney silent beside her. Bruce remained still. Trask continued, voice firm. Effective immediately, the plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. All legal costs will be paid by the plaintiff. Furthermore, this court is referring the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into perjury, obstruction, and conspiracy. A gasp broke in the gallery, but Bruce didn't react. No fist pump, no sigh of relief, just a slow, steady exhale. It wasn't joy. It was release. As the gavel struck one final time, Trask looked up at Bruce. "Mr. Willis, you walked into this courtroom as a man accused. You leave today as someone who defended himself with clarity, integrity, and discipline. This court commends your conduct." Bruce nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." Outside, the world had shifted. Reporters swarmed him on the steps, shouting questions, cameras flashing in every direction. Bruce stopped at the top, looked out at the sea of microphones, and spoke into the silence. "I didn't do this to prove I was right. I did it so people stop thinking they can get away with this just because they have power." One reporter called out, "Are you going to sue back?" Bruce shook his head. "No. I already won." Then he walked, not to a car, not to a waiting assistant, just down the steps, into the noise of downtown LA, alone. He passed posters with his face on them, upcoming films, old films, versions of himself frozen in time. But none of those characters had done what he just did. Not John McClane, not David Dunn, not Joe Hallenbeck. Bruce did this. Later that night, back in his loft, he poured a glass of bourbon and opened the windows wide. The city air rolled in, loud, imperfect, alive. His phone buzzed with calls from agents, producers, networks. He let them ring. Instead, he opened a file. A new script, blank page, top line. Fade in, INTI courtroom, day. He smiled. This time, it was going to be real. This time, no one else was going to rewrite him. And if you've been here for the whole story, if you watched it unfold word by word, you already know he didn't just win the case, he rewrote the ending. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about what one person can do, don't leave just yet. Subscribe to the channel and click the video on screen. It was chosen specifically for you, and trust me, you're going to love it.